Good evening. We'll call this meeting of the Complete Streets and Safety Committee to order. It is 6:34 p.m. on October the 4th. First up, roll call.
Detmer.
Present.
I'm going to go left to right tonight. Tainter.
Present.
Wozniak.
Present.
Strecker.
Present.
Cabrera is absent.
All right. Next up then is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Detmer.
Aye.
Tainter.
Aye.
Wozniak.
Aye.
Strecker.
Aye.
Thank you.
Are there any oral communications?
No oral communications at this time.
Alrighty. Moving on then. Minutes from last meeting, we've all seen them. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes or any comments?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Detmer.
Aye.
Tainter.
Aye.
Wozniak.
Aye.
Strecker.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to old business. Investigation of the residential parking permit program for Central Brisbane. Since the last meeting, staff has sent out the draft program policy report, I guess. Maybe we can start by having Tomas or Karen comment first on the report and just sort of maybe set us up, and then we can open it up for discussion and dig in.
A couple of things, a couple of developments. One is that Commander Garcia is participating or going to. Did he get back on the Zoom meeting? But we're having some, so we're having some challenges with Zoom, I guess. And so we're not sure, we asked him to call in, so we're not sure if he's going to be able to speak or if we're going to have to repeat his comments, which is unfortunate, unless we get some notification somehow of how to correct the issue. The other part is we talked quite a bit about the enforcement options and talked more to the contractors, consultants they were looking at, and came across actually another way to do enforcement that kind of created more options. So sort of on a sidebar on the staff level, I talked to the city manager. We're going to go through what all of that is tonight, but I asked to talk to the liaisons and with the chair and vice chair, because at this point, the way we see it, there are 6 options. And that just seems like way too much to bring to council. And I did have a quick conversation with Councilmember Mackin, and she agreed. So we're going to talk through what those options are. I think that this is still an opportunity tonight to go over the research that you guys found as we put it into that policy and refine that some. But I think we're going to need another meeting to kind of finalize what the plan is to bring to council. So, I think there are a few things to talk about. We can look, I don't know if you guys had time to look at the document that Tomas drafted and we reviewed on the policy that would be like the appendix to the agenda report, or if we want to talk about the new developments and enforcement first. But I think those are kind of the 2 things that we're going to want to do tonight.
I guess I'd like to open it to the committee, but I think my personal opinion would be maybe hear the new developments, as that probably has a significant impact. But how would you guys feel? Would you rather hear or the developments first, or go through this policy?
If I could ask a question, are the developments just on the enforcement aspect of the paper that you guys have put together, or is it a wider scope than that?
Technically, it's just the enforcement, but some of the different types of enforcement don't allow for the same program model that we came up with originally.
Okay,
So kind of does reach beyond.
I understand. Thank you.
Linda, Greg? Yeah. Linda, Greg, any thoughts on sort of the order? Would you have a preference in terms of reviewing this document first or just hearing the updates?
I have a lot of notes on these that I printed out and spent some time with it, and I have a lot of notes. At your pleasure.
Greg, any?
Either way is fine with me.
Okay. Maybe in that case, maybe we can get a high-level summary from you guys in terms of the enforcement. If we can get Commander Garcia online, if it's too difficult, we'll move forward with maybe reviewing the
Yeah, I don't think it'll take me a long time to explain, and I think he's not able to hear. So I think he's actually like trying to mic onto that computer, so that's not ideal. What we, maybe the spreadsheet would be good, the one that I did. So originally, what we'd been asked to, from the council liaisons to look at was two options for areas, all of central Brisbane and the targeted streets. Two ways to do enforcement in those areas, either with a displayed permit and the police department does complaint-based enforcement on a displayed permit, or contracted enforcement that would use a license plate reader and look at every car, no displayed permit, just read every car and see who had a permit or not. The police department have suggested that they could also use a license plate reader, and they were more, there's the writing on the wall is that maybe there's going to be some program and they don't really have the staffing, but what could they do that is efficient was kind of what they were looking into. And so Commander Garcia talked directly with the company that would provide the database and issue permits and keep that data. And they said, if you drive with your license plate reader, it picks up who doesn't have a permit, that reader, and citations can be mailed. So for a bit of time, we thought that that could be really efficient and inexpensive. You need someone to drive those 5 streets. If you don't have a permit, a ticket comes in the mail. So, but then, I guess Commander Garcia, talking with his consultant, found that I think there's still case law or cases making their way through court, so no city is actually mailing citations that way. So we're not comfortable being the first one to be doing that and having it be challenged extensively. So it'd still be a matter of getting out and putting a citation on a window, but with a license plate reader, much more efficient to do so. But that doesn't come without some cost. And the feedback that I'm getting is that the council's very concerned about these programs that add cost and don't have revenue related to them. And, the goal of this is not to get revenue from people that parked illegally. We're not really factoring that into, the net of this program, because we don't know what the revenue would be. We don't know if everybody's going to start complying and there's no revenue from this program, So those 2 additional options are on there, license plate readers by Brisbane Police Department as options 2B and 4B. And, I think that in all of our experiences, we think that some of these are less favored. We know that cost is a factor, so we don't think that the council is going to want to go for the highest ticket item in cases where you have to do all of Brisbane. The police are saying, we need more staff to be able to do all of Brisbane. So that's kind of the goal of talking to the liaisons is you don't really want us to bring forward 6 up. Like, that would just be a really long, not direct conversation. So when the police doing the enforcement, either on a complaint-based or using their license plate reader, would save cost, but if they're driving through once, we don't have that 24-hour built-in, you can park on the street as a guest, as an emergency visitor, and not have to do anything. You would have to apply for a guest permit, and we're finding that if you have to apply online, and if we're using a displayed permit, you get a PDF that you can print out and put in your car. If it's a license plate reader, you just enter the license plate, I think what Chicago does, and then the license plate reader notes that you have a permit for a temporary period of time. So those are covered. But if it's an emergency, it's not a simple thing. You don't just enter there's a few things you have to put in there, and maybe you have to upload your justification. I'm not sure. So in an emergency, some people may not do that because they're in an emergency, and then they're going to have to be in that appeal situation. Look, can you overturn my citation? I was here for this emergency. Here's my justification. So that's the difference between the 2 programs. It's the way we had originally envisioned it with the 24 hours. It was really simple for those short-term visitors not to have to go through a process.
And is that $5,000, that covers the sort of database and that aspect of being able to print and sort of order online, that's covered in the 5,000.
Yeah, so that's the setup fee for that consultant. There's still a permit application fee. That, I didn't put that in there. It's, like I said, it was $10 to $20 per application. I think you had said you didn't want that to be any cost, but we're also hearing from council that they don't want the cost to be high, so I don't know if they'd be willing to make people that are applying for permits pay that nominal fee.
And my other question, so the 24-hour one, as we discussed, would be for if we went with LAS, right, versus if we went with if it was with the Brisbane PD, then the 24-hour one wouldn't really be in place. But like the potential for the 24-hour guest pass, correct?
Yeah,
For which I guess
good question, because if they're using a license plate reader and they're saying on the targeted streets with the staff they have, with a license plate reader, they think they can drive them every day.
Okay.
So,
With
you
the
know,
targeted streets though, not with the central Brisbane, right? Basically.
with the central Brisbane, they're saying they would need additional staff.
Okay.
And that's the $60,000 there?
We just lost our screen. That is for their license plate reader equipment, yeah.
Okay. That's the equipment, not the additional staff that would be needed to potentially drive around with that equipment.
Right, that's why I put it in the one-time cost column, right? So I know it was new information for some of the staff too, so we're all trying to absorb it and see how that affects the options that we have.
Great. Well, I guess with that information, I still think there are, I guess, pieces of the proposal that we should still walk through and sort of, I guess, comment on outside of the enforcement and keep those sort of 6, I guess, potential options on the table. But we can kind of go through some of the other pieces, I think, that maybe are not tied to that as much, some of the other points. And so, yeah, I guess maybe we'll go ahead and open. I know Linda had quite a, I think you said you spent quite a bit of time. You wanted to maybe give us a quick high-level overview, potentially, of some of the main pieces, and we can kind of dive in.
I'll
and
do
go
my
around.
best. Under program options, I think there's a couple of things here. Under notes, I would call it options presented or additional options. Let me back up a little bit. I'm uncomfortable with saying council can, without saying that these are options. I think it softens it a little bit, but it also is what we were asked to do, was to provide ideas and options. So under program options, which is on the third page of the whole thing, I'd like to see it say options presented. And then some of the acronyms for like CSO. I don't know what that means.
Community
or-
Service Officer.
Okay. See, I think it should be spelled out. And I know what an LPR is, but it would be a lot easier if that was spelled out also. Just a moment. Let me just look at my notes here.
I guess similarly, one comment was maybe the organization of this. I mean, I think overall the information is fantastic. I think this piece, what lost me was sort of following the 1A, kind of going up and down and kind of tracking which one it referred to. So I don't know if there maybe is
Oh, I guess that's what's referring to
it's notes for the different,
Okay.
options
options, right?
above, yeah.
So
At least
there
that's my
are
reading of it.
Options, okay.
PPP options. I'd like to add one, number 5, where it's complaint-based only, which has no additional dollars needed to do that from the city. There's a bunch of options here, but all of them have price tags attached to them for the most part. And so I'd like to see an item number 5 added, or even moved up to item number 1, where it's complaint-based only and no additional staff or license plate readers or any equipment needs to be purchased, because that's been left out completely.
Is that an option? Not
Yeah,
that we can have a complaint base without any?
yes, it's just, we don't own this information, we're just providing it to the council so they can make a decision. So leaving that off feels like,
Well, I guess what I'm confused about is, I guess what I'm confused is a complaint-based option still would have costs, right? Because there still is a police officer who has to go out to the scene, right?
right, and from what I understand, they'll do it as they can. If it were citywide, if it's only the initial streets that we're doing, they can probably handle it. But with the council restating so many times that they need to keep the costs down, we are having a budget problem that it should be included, complaint-based only, as an option with, sure, there's going to be costs, but.
Isn't that option 1 and 3?
3, I think.
1 and 3?
Is PD enforcement if complaint. Patrick, did you want to also make a comment?
No, I was just going to comment that I agree with Linda, and I think that would probably be, yes, there is a cost involved of the officer's time to go out there, but that's an existing cost in that they only have to go out there when called upon, and I think that would be the lowest cost option.
Is that not option number 3 right now, as laid out here?
Yeah, you're right, it is.
Yes, I think
don't
so.
know how I missed
Yes.
it.
And I mean, there is some cost, I think, the permits, which is $5,000, but other than that, that
right.
would be the only cost for the target, yeah.
And I think
that's where I
it's
was
the
confused.
softest
So I was like,
approach.
wait, they still have to give out the permits, right? But that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the wording could be maybe complaint-based with PD enforcement,
Yeah.
if that's sort of the
But it's
concern.
not new equipment or new
Yeah, just
personnel.
I think the cost of having permits issued by someone,
Mm-hmm.
which is $5,000.
Just the IPS stuff, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought I read this very carefully and I didn't see it. I kept looking for it.
Regarding the targeted streets, is it possible to also add the appendix of the figure for sort of what those streets are, or do we have a target? Is that outlined here, or is that more for council to decide another time for what the targeted streets?
The map that we sent.
Yeah, I guess we could say targeted streets here, but it's unclear what streets we're
But
referring
it should
to.
be all together into one package,
Maybe
right?
as an appendix or something refer to this figure for what
That's
streets.
important, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Don't mention them here, I believe, either. Yeah. And then maybe
Well, it doesn't actually say that we're going to do a targeted program in here, does it? If somebody correct me if I'm wrong again.
it doesn't say we're going to, but I guess of the targeted street options, what does that mean? Targeted streets? Do we define that, or do we just leave that open-ended? Sort of council can define targeted streets another
I
time.
thought they already did.
I thought they did in council.
Should
They
that
gave
be
it- they had a list
referenced
of
here
5
then?
streets or
Liaison.
something,
Yeah.
5 blocks.
Liaison,
Yeah.
I think confirmed it.
Yeah,
Just
maybe we'll-
mentioning that here somewhere, that those are the streets we're referring to in a map.
Yeah, we'll lay out what those streets are, and then from then on, we could just refer to them as targeted. We'll start with what those streets are.
I guess in the purpose, right at the top here, I guess a fixed number of parking permits are issued to a licensed driver with the vehicle registered to an address within a parking permit area. I guess that wording is a little different than what I read below, which is about how we determine the eligible driver. So I guess I wanted to verify, how are we determining permit number, or is that, maybe I'm jumping a little bit, but
That's
this
one
seems
of
to
my
see it's sort of
questions,
per a licensed driver, and then below we have a different sort of criteria. So I just want to make sure, is this the right time to kind of go through with a fine tooth comb, or is that sort of a next phase after this piece?
I don't think we have another phase other than to fix up enforcement, so this is the meeting where
yeah.
we're going through it. Now, I had the same question, where does it say? It says are generally limited to 2 per household, but it doesn't say that ours,
And then I think down below where we define sort of who's eligible and what that means, it's, very specific about proof of residency. So it's parking permit application section. It says we need the resident's owner name reflecting the area. So just wanted to clarify that piece of sort of what is the requirement and how do we limit, or how are we deciding the number per?
I thought it did just determine how you establish residency.
And I think those two are conflicting, so I'm wondering. I think down below is conflicting with what above
Okay.
says, I think. Unless I'm
Can
misreading
I
that.
answer?
Yeah.
This is pretty rough. We've each been working on a part, and we haven't been able to coordinate very well with Commander Garcia. He's been out, I've been out. Tomas has been trying to do the best you can, starting with the San Bruno model. So, yeah, we want your feedback. We know it's not ready for prime time. Your feedback helps us to get it correct.
One question I have,
And thank you
is-
for putting it together, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you.
is there a way to put this into a diagrammatic pictorial view? I think council would find it much more understandable in the few minutes of a council meeting,
The options or the whole,
like how
Thing.
each one would work.
each
You
one
know,
what?
I mean, with the graphic of a
Each
car
one-
violation, here's a reader, and then that has, points to a cloud, and then the ticket comes back through the mail, or the officer writes it there. I mean, picture is worth so much more than,
I've said that I guess we can't mail citations. We thought for a few days there that we could, and that was gonna be really efficient, but I don't think we can do that. The thought crossed my mind of a flow chart between, first, for the council, first choose, do you want all of Brisbane or just targeted streets? Do you want, displayed permits or license plate readers? Do you want complaint-based or,
and put the cost right on the
Neutral.
flow chart for each decision.
But I don't know
That would
that
be
that's-
very helpful.
I don't know that that's very easy to make, because just even getting this spreadsheet was hard to get that right. So I don't know, that would be something that Tomas would have to do, so I'll let you answer.
I love flowcharts. They just make my life so easy.
Take a crack at it. We'll see how it ends up, but I can't guarantee that, everyone, it would be on, and then it would make it on, but I can try.
Okay. So should we continue through these notes?
Yes.
Okay, following program options on the next page, it says, note that Brisbane PD enforcement would be either complaint-based with displayed permits, at no cost. I was thinking that should be added in to city, no cost to city. And, or the license plate reader based with mailed citations, which that's, we don't know about that right now. It says Brisbane PD staff could only make one visit per complaint, so there'd be no grace period for emergency. And it doesn't give a cost for the license plate reader here. And I should back up. When it says note that, it feels leading. It's like, it almost feels like we're pushing a license plate reader. So I was wondering if we could just delete note that and just start with Brisbane PD enforcement. And to title this paragraph, other options. And number the items. And there should be a cost attached for license plate reader. I think I said that.
Those costs are in the spreadsheet. I guess the spreadsheet would be part of this document as well, right? That would be sort of an appendix to this document.
Right. This is what we're editing, but they would have access to all that spreadsheet with all the costs. So
Because there would still be a $5,000 fee for the city, unless that gets passed on to residents.
Well, I'm just thinking if you're reading through it and you have to keep going to the spreadsheet and then coming back to this, if those costs were just plugged in here and there, I think it'd be an easier read. And it just kind of left me wondering, okay, and how much is that and where do I find it? And it just plugged in as notes. And that it also should state the cost for just complaint-based with no materials and no license plate reader, no extra officer hours.
Maybe as a column on the left-hand side. If
Yeah,
it-
or just in words,
Okay.
or in parentheses.
Craig, is there anything you wanted to comment on about here in this section, particularly before we because most of my comments are in the sections below. This section, I think,
Oh,
is still rough for me, but
The next item.
I'm sorry.
Contract enforcement by LAS. It doesn't show a cost there either. And then I have comments for the potential residential parking
Yeah.
permit eligibility, if that's where you were going next.
that's where,
Go
yeah,
ahead,
quite a few
I'll
comments
follow
there as
you.
well. But no, for Gregory, you want to throw anything in there first, or?
No, I think what, those are pretty good points. I would just, well, I think we're already talking about with the separate spreadsheet anyways with the costs. So no matter what, all the costs will be visible. Just hopefully making that more obvious, I guess, would be very important because, as you said, with the council, they might not have that much time to look at it. Yeah, hopefully they can read it beforehand, but more visual would help in that section. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess in our mind, we figured it's right on the spreadsheet, but if it's just a simple format change, doesn't seem like too big of a ask of a change. So.
Thank you.
I do have a question, and I may have missed this reading through it, but I see references to a permit allows a vehicle to park longer than the posted. Is there a recommended posted time limit in the document? I may have missed that. Like how many hours a vehicle is allowed to park, or is it 0? Or
Where are you referring to?
I'm sorry?
Where specifically in the document are you referring?
That's what I was wondering. I didn't see it. I may have missed it.
Oh, any information about the hours? Yeah, that needs to be added.
Okay. What are we thinking that should be? I think that's an important number, especially as it relates to emergency vehicles. I mean, if it's a couple hours or something.
Emergency vehicles makes me think fire, police.
No, okay, someone who has come in a private vehicle for an emergency and is parked there, right?
Yeah, so if you're using a complaint-based displayed permit, we've heard from Commander Garcia we couldn't get the Zoom to work, so he's on YouTube, but he's not on Zoom because we can't hear him and he can't hear us. They can come through once per day, so it's either you have a permit or you don't. Our other model is 24 hours that
Right.
when whatever type of enforcement, be it a Brisbane police officer or a contract, would look at every car every day and would only ticket after 24 hours.
I thought when we discussed this a while back, and we were looking at the LAS as the enforcement process, we had set hours of, I forget, was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or something, that any vehicle that LAS scanned during that time frame that did not have a permit would immediately get a ticket. Correct?
Yeah, that was the original model, and then we talked about doing daytime because it's cheaper for LAS somewhat, although if they're going to give us a full-time body, it's not really cheaper. If we were doing all of central Brisbane, if we were doing targeted streets, they can do it a lot cheaper because they're already doing other cities between 8 and 5 or 9 and 6 or whatever hours.
And does that necessitate a change then in how they would operate if they're coming through in the daytime?
LAS?
In terms of whether the ticket is issued immediately if the vehicle does not have a permit, or it's on the return trip to the next day that.
They could do either. I think the committee had come up with the idea of
Right.
24 hours so that then it kind of invalidates the need for as many guest permits or emergency type permits.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I thought we originally set up the evening hours so that there wasn't overnight parking.
Yeah, that's what
from-
Patrick just said.
Yeah, and then we went to 24 hours after that. But what would be
I
the
don't
purpose
recall
of it?
that.
I'm confused. I don't know what the purpose of having LAS come through during business hours, how much good that would do.
Anybody else want
I think I remember when we talked about that. That was because originally we were talking about the 10 p.m., but the cost was so much more exorbitant for Laz to come by at late at night. And then, the thought was to switch to daytime. And then I think the thought as well was to alleviate some of the issues with emergency parking and stuff like that. They would come through, say, at 10 o'clock every day, if that's like their scheduled time to drive through. And then tag each one, and if they come through the next day and there's a car that's still parked there that does not have a permit, then that one will get the ticket.
Okay. Okay.
But so that's kind of the question, though, is whether or not we want Laz to come through, or the BPD, right, come through and issue a ticket immediately if they don't see a permit, or come through once every day, within some time during the day. And if it's the second round and that car that doesn't have a permit is still there, then they give them a ticket the second time around.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, right? Is that?
All right.
It's
think
a
that's
lot to
great-
put in a document, and I think we really, if we can narrow down all these it just further, it makes it easier, because it's hard for all of us to understand. There's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yes.
And, what we got from the liaisons was every idea is a good idea. Well, guess what? There's a whole lot of different ways to do it. So somebody's got to narrow it down before it goes to full council. That's my
Is this
thought.
going to be presented to the council as your report, or is this going to go into their packet?
There's no difference. I have to do an agenda report, written, and present a verbal report that summarizes that
So
written
all of
report.
this would be in your presentation to the council?
You
live?
know, you heard what I said about meeting with the liaisons,
Yeah.
right? So I'm hoping that from them, they say, this one and this one, we just don't even like it. Just bring these, they originally told us 3, but the 3 were kind of 4, because they could be enforced 2 different ways. And now we've got these further ones, so we've got to refine this before talking to the full council. It's just, but I mean, I think I would say what I told you guys in the beginning, and, what's the goal? Where do we want to do it? How important is cost? So let's say what we think we know is that they don't want it to cost very much.
Or anything, if possible.
It can't cost 0.
I know, but minimal.
Minimal, I agree, minimal.
Yeah.
And let's say they say, okay, well, all of the central Brisbane, any way you slice that, it's expensive. So this is purely hypothetical, because I'm not a member of the, I'm not speaking for them. But let's say they do. So let's say we're talking about targeted streets, and we're talking about Brisbane Police Department, whether it's an officer or the code enforcement officer, somebody's going to respond to those complaints, or they're going to go out once a day with a license plate reader. Let's say we lease it and it costs less than $60,000. I don't even think that's still going to fly, based on speaking to Councilmember Mackin, but I don't know. And again, she's only one of 5. Do we want it to be one hit? If it's complaint based, we've been told they have, they're going to write a ticket on the one visit. If let's say the council says you can get a license plate reader, you drive all those streets. What kind of program? We could have either program, but should we bring them both options, or are we bringing them a narrowed down option? Because they kind of said all ideas are good ideas, right?
My sense about it is that we should bring them all our options. That I've heard that directly from Liaison Mackin, that we just should bring all options and let them decide.
Okay, so we can, if you're using a license plate reader, drive through once a day, and people can get a pass for parking in that same spot for less than 24 hours. Or we can require guest permits of everyone, and people would get a ticket the first time. And if you came on an emergency and you didn't apply for a guest permit, you're going to have to appeal that citation. I think those are the 2 ways to do it. If you used a license plate reader. If you used a displayed permit, what we've heard is that you have to have a permit when the complaint happens.
Okay, if we're asked to submit all ideas, do we have to come up with how to get them done also? Do we have to resolve that, or would that possibly come back to us to look for resolutions?
Like for, what do you mean by resolution?
What you were just talking about, you know, that one way to do it versus the other way to do it. If we just give them the ways to do it or the options of how to do it, and they want us to look into it further, they can narrow down the options. We don't have to do that. At least
Yeah, I
that's my
mean, probably
understanding.
staff could, if they know what they want, staff could probably get them what they would need to implement a program. Like, you know, we're gonna have to revise or write a new municipal code. That's not gonna fall on the committee.
Okay. I'm just going back to, there's no bad ideas. Just give us all your ideas. And I don't want to take things out.
Well, that's why I don't know how to make a flow chart on using, Microsoft tools, but if there is one, maybe a flow chart is an option. Do you want to have a 24-hour grace period and not require every guest to get a permit? Or do you want to require a guest to get a permit and hang it or license plate? Like maybe that
think-
flow chart would make it
A
help
flowchart
them
for
move through the
presentation
decisions.
Along with all of this backup documentation, for them to read at their leisure, might be the way to go. If we can come up with a flow chart, I'd be happy to help with that if it's being done here in the office. I will be away for a week this month, but
Well, Tomas is going to do the first draft, so Tomas, you can.
Yeah, I'll just give it a
contact Linda.
shot and then we'll go from there. I think I can probably put something together.
okay. If you want, I will come down and
What days are you away?
I'm away the 15th through the 20th, the week of the 15th.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Okay, thanks, Tomas.
So I guess in terms of moving through this document then, for the residential parking permits eligibility area, do we have any sort of, to me, when I read through it the first time, it still felt a little disconnect in terms of, there's 2 permits generally limited, so I don't know I guess there's some more details below. I did have some questions on sort of the cars and the work car versus lease car versus commercial trucks and how we define those. Is that a size yeah.
I didn't like that section. I was trying to,
Okay, you're just, some placeholder perhaps,
yeah, like get the police, Commander Garcia or police staff to help us refine that. This is from,
Yeah, that's very San Mateo, like pretty much verbatim.
Okay, got it, yeah.
No, but there are tradespeople in town who have a work truck, and
Right.
I guess we need to make a distinction between, say, something that's pickup sized, full-size pickup or van, as opposed to something the size of an Amazon truck, say, which I think is a little bit large to
I also
park on
mean-
the street, right?
And also, I've seen like taxis also, like I think there's some taxi drivers in town who park their vehicles outside of their apartments or homes.
Right, right.
Yeah, I had the same, and there's a piece that says no work vehicle types located. So I think maybe there is a refinement there, especially in the circumstances that were sort of mentioned here. That was definitely a piece there. Any other comments on this section? Just I guess,
Yes.
Linda, please.
Under residential parking permit eligibility, the title, I'd like to say potential residential parking permit eligibility, so that it's an option, again, for the council and not a directive. And then moving down to parking permits issued, eligible vehicles that may not. It sounds like direction to me again, or so I'd just like to see that this is presented as options. Option 1, 2, 3, 4, however many of them there are.
So maybe the way to word this is recommended?
Not recommended,
Not
we're not
recommended, okay.
recommending, just options.
Sort of like a
It's
menu
not
of
up to us.
options.
Yeah. We don't want to recommend anything. We just want to give them options, and it's up to the council, period, because it's not our job, and they've made that clear. And then the guidelines for eligibility and the number of permits, I think, might have a better place in the spreadsheet. And that's it for me on that page.
Sorry, what was that last? I was checking in with
Well,
Mario.
I was thinking that the guidelines for eligibility should go on the spreadsheet. And that in this section, actually, because I stated that incorrectly, the number of permits should be suggested in this section. Because it says are generally limited to 2. However, you know, if there's a but to that, then we need to,
I think this is maybe where my point, because this says here generally limited to 2 per household, but in the opening piece it said parking, fixed number of parking permits per licensed driver with a vehicle. So I guess that was maybe the clarity piece. Yeah. And I don't honestly remember where we left off in terms of number or how we were going to define. So I was hoping to go
well,
back to
I
the
don't
notes.
think it's up to us.
Yeah,
to
oh no, yeah,
define
or I
it
guess the
again.
different options, yeah. What some of
And
the
it, so
different
it might
options
say
were.
in other cities, generally, they're limited to 2 per household. But that doesn't necessarily work for us. We have such a unique community.
I don't know. To me, that feels a little in the weeds. They did ask us to look at other cities and not reinvent the wheel. Now we're saying we don't want to bounce off that new cities.
No, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we should probably say in other cities, they are generally limited to 2 per household.
I was hoping that, well, we would clarify, I guess, yeah, we're not coming to one recommendation, but we had talked about that a couple other cities use that 2 permanent guest permits that can float between whatever vehicle.
I
So is
like
that
that idea.
part of our, not recommendation, options?
But I guess that kind of comes down to guest, that would be guest floating parking kind of thing, or is that separate from guest parking?
Well, the example, I don't remember what city, some people used it for cars in the household.
That was Santa Clara? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we just
So
build
you guys
that
have that as an
in.
option below. Say we've also seen that there may be a floating permit.
I like that idea, especially for guests.
Yeah, could be for guests, and then see guest section below for other guest options.
Well, if they're, what was the term, flexible or transferable or something like that?
It was transferable.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how my family visits, and they would stay a week or 2 at a time. And Karen, you formerly suggested that I could they could park in my driveway and I could use my permit on the street. We could go the other way around too, where they could use my permit on the street if they were interchangeable between the vehicles at that residence. So, and the way someone's always pulling in and out of my house, it would have to move a whole bunch of times.
Sure, I was in that comment in Santa Clara, I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe that the lots are 50-foot wide and there's more frontage. So having 4 seems easier in that type of a city, in a flatter, more spread out city. So
Right.
what about just a comment or a footnote that Santa Clara typically has larger frontage lots? Keep that in mind in the thought, something like that.
I think that's great. I have a feeling at some point it's going to have to be boiled down to necessity also of the individual household, but we don't need to address that right now.
I agree.
I think overall, my sense about this is that I want to make it look more like options offered to, instead of directives. I want to really be careful about creating directives to the city and giving them as much information on costs as possible.
Yeah, and again, this isn't like, we think this is ready, we think it's
Right.
perfect.
I just wanted to
Right. And we
comment on
we
that.
started with
I'm
this.
sure something, you guys have done so much work. I really want to take a moment
A lot
to
of
appreciate
information
you
moving.
publicly.
A lot of moving parts. And this was, San Mateo was what they adopted, so there weren't options in it. And we didn't get all the way through fleshing this out to,
Yeah, San
represent
Mateo
the
seems
options.
most like our situation than any of the others. Also on the spreadsheet, I think it's worth mentioning that we've looked at other cities more than once, and that we looked at a lot more cities than this and boiled it down to these, which seemed the most applicable to our situation.
As a note,
As a
the-
note,
to the-
because we've worked so hard on it for so long, and I don't want it to seem like, we just threw this together in a week when we've been working on it for over a year now, and
yeah.
it's just, to let them know we're really, really trying to work with them.
I hope they do understand.
Yeah, it needs to be in writing.
Someone's making a note.
Thanks. Sorry, you guys. I hope I'm not bugging the heck out of everybody here.
No.
On the next page, under guest parking permits, can we add suggested to the front of that section? Or suggested guest parking permit issuance or something like that?
Okay, yeah, it's sensing a pattern here, so yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I get,
And
but this
I get-
one, oh, sorry, this one is sort of dependent on one of the sub options above, because if it's like license plate, I guess is it, yeah, it is sort of. I guess are there other options that we're not thinking about here in that case? Then, so for instance, if it's a license plate reader, is it still one of these? I guess is it. Yeah, is it still a transferable one that would be a physical tag that's separate from the other different program option, or are we saying that this is sort of an option if you go with that route, and then the other option might be a different sort of, how do you define guests? That sort of, yeah.
Because that is a question, especially when it relates to the emergency parking that we're talking about. If we're giving them 24-hour, because one of the options is that they have a 24-hour
Grace period.
grace period versus immediate. If obviously it's immediate, then that kind of comes into place of needing a guest permit potential. But if they give 24 hours, then the guest permit potential is they only have 24 hours, before they have to move their vehicle.
Or would they be able to get a guest permit if they're
To stay
staying for longer?
longer.
Yeah.
Right.
Without
but-
having to move every day.
If it's BPD entirely managed, they would not have that because the officer can only come there once, right?
And if it's
either
or if it's
issue a ticket or
complaint-based,
not
yeah.
at that one visit.
Let me go over again how we've got to use someone like the Integrated Parking Service, IPS, whatever they stand for, that manages the database. And so they can do either way. If we're using license plate readers, someone could go online and enter their information, and now that license plate is uploaded in the database. So when the reader goes by, it says permit. If it's for 2 days, it says permit for 2 days. If that car stays longer, then it would be no permit. Or you can go online and apply for one, and it gives you something to print out and put on your dashboard or wherever it's designated. So there are two ways that in a very short amount, a couple of minutes, you can get that guest permit for whatever period is decided and not get a ticket, even without the 24-hour grace period of not needing a permit. So it works for planned guests that, the household has to tell their guests, you have to do this. And I guess it's worked in other cities, right? Many of them use it. But it's kind of instantaneous to give you permission to be on the street in the whatever parameters are decided on. The number, the period of time, the number that are allowed per household, all of that.
I guess with the short-term guests being underlined, how are we defining short? Because if it's if the registered owner has a permit, they can give that to the same guest for the whole year, or no? I guess how. Not that we should be defining that necessarily, but I guess what is short-term guests?
That's what Santa Clara allows.
Yeah, but it's but the same person could have that tagged the entire year potentially,
Correct.
and it would not matter. Yeah,
Right.
but
And this was from San Mateo, who didn't have that kind of program. So this clearly needs to be fleshed out or have its own flow chart.
or
One or the
define
other.
what short-term, how long that is, or 30 days or whatever. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I'd like to add to that section on guest parking on hang tags. I think if we added into there, if we're using hang tags, it must be displayed from the rearview mirror instead of just kind of out there. And then the next sentence says transferable between vehicles that would be eligible to use a residential parking permit, and somehow, I think it should say and guests, or including guests, or something, if it is transferable. So that there's a guideline offered there as an option.
Why would it be transferable to a resident that already has a? I guess what case would you transfer to somebody who already has a registered vehicle?
I wouldn't. I mean, if my grandson came home from Hawaii and
Yeah.
stayed with me for a week,
He could get your permit, yeah.
I would give him my permit to park on the street, or I would park on the street and he would park in my driveway, but I'm old and he'd have to go in the street. So it's just, I'm just looking at potential problems from the
Yeah.
perspective of my life, and I'm also trying to include this perspective of potential lives of other people and their needs. And I think it's important to be able to use your permit interchangeably with your family for your needs, instead of making it so stringent that I have to go get another permit for my grandson to visit me for a week, or for my daughter to come down for the weekend or something. I
So
think,
maybe there's a clause that we can, perhaps one option is to have permits be transferable, you know?
yeah, I'd
and
like
sort
to
of
see that in
open-ended?
there.
So the original, what we looked at was Santa Clara was, tell me if this is right. The two were household members, and then the two more were the guest permits that could be used by
Correct.
anyone.
The two household members under their plan were not transferable.
So in Linda's example, great example, could she, in Santa Clara's program, not get her own permit because she has a driveway spot, but apply for the two guest permits and hand them out to whoever she wants? Yeah.
Or could I get my permit and use that for a guest?
But
if
wouldn't
was
it
a
be,
hang tag?
wouldn't it be better to have, kind of follow with what we started with, way back when, is two per household? If you have two cars registered there and two driver's licenses with that address, and then guest permits on top of that. Because that applies to most everybody. And if you could get that guest permit that anyone could use, and you don't need your own household permit, then it's kind of this, works the same for your needs.
Yeah, yeah. Keeping in mind that there are a lot of properties that don't have off-street parking, also don't have frontage to park in front of their homes, but somewhere close by. And just making it as manageable a program as possible, so throwing in the options for these things is just, it seems a more delicate way to get going here, and a delicate option to offer the council.
Yeah, when we go back to the data that we collected, a lot of it was the same cars night after night. Most of them were the same cars parked in
Yeah,
the same block.
even the motorcycles, yeah. That was during COVID, so those cars were probably there a lot more often than not, that we did that walkthrough.
Yeah, and we only checked at that dinner time,
Yeah.
5 to
No, we had
6:30.
3 different times during the day, I thought, that we checked those.
I thought we did them all.
2 times, morning and night, I thought.
Okay,
I only did evenings. I thought it was 5 or 6 p.m., and then we did visitation at lunch because that's when it's busiest.
I kind of remember being in the locations twice a day, like
I thought
Patrick
twice a
said.
day, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I just didn't do mornings because I'm not a morning person.
That's why the data was skewed. Okay,
I guess, yeah, moving on, I guess, to the next section then, just wanted to clear, so for parking permit, there's obviously an application process that includes name and address, and then we're saying that it's current license with the DMV registration with the address. And then, I guess that third point I was quite confused by, but I'm not sure if it's just, if you don't have that, is it saying that if you do not have a license and a DMV registration, then you can instead have residency ownership, or yeah, I guess, could you get clarification on that, on this section?
Yeah, I think that's the intent.
So the idea is you'd have per address. And does that jive with what was above before in terms of how we're thinking about the program? Or would this change sort of if we did a 2 per household? That would be sort of fluid.
No,
I guess.
and I think this was with the 2 per household, that you have to prove that you live at that household, and you actually need it for a car that you have.
At that household.
You don't have 5 cars and 1 driver. You know, there's a permit for each car and unique driver, not one driver in the household has 4 permits for 4 cars.
Got it.
Why not? I mean,
'Cause that's
let's say it's a
storage.
a single person who owns 2 cars, could not they have 2 permits?
I think
one
that was
person?
the goal, to eliminate that they should store their car.
But down
2
below
cars
is
is not
price.
excessive, right? I think we thought,
I think that's subjective. What's the number then? That's not.
I mean, the numbers that came up in committee here were like 10.
Yeah, 10 is, but is that the
But
line?
certainly 4 or 5, I don't know what the number is, but I don't think 2 is, in my opinion, I don't think 2 is excessive.
I guess, is there also a clause where you can get more, I missed this, but is there a piece below that does say you can apply for more additional cost, or is that a separate part? Or maybe
With-
2 is sort of base, and then above that you
Did
get
any of the
additional?
other programs allow that, to store that second
I
car?
don't think they address it. I don't recall seeing
They
that.
didn't require you to identify an individual driver and car registration at a household?
I don't know how they did that.
That was my understanding, but I looked at a couple of them.
This is how San Mateo does it, though. They require 1 vehicle per licensed driver.
Yeah.
Only 1 permit per licensed driver.
And I do remember, this is from way back when, though, not the one I just researched, but from Monterey, my partner had to get a permit in Monterey, and it was 1 per house, and they were very strict about the registration had to be tied to the address at that particular one. I mean,
And so you just had to prove you lived at that address.
you had to prove that the vehicle was owned by a person who lives at that
At
address.
that address.
Yeah.
Well, on the spreadsheet, it says Costa Mesa has a maximum of 4 permits, no guest permits. And then it says / resident distinction. I'm not sure what that means, but
It says there's no guest or resident distinction. So you live in a household, you get 4, and then that's all you get. Whether there's a guest, a family member, a sibling, whatever. That's what that point means.
okay. So there's some play here, and we don't need to decide it. We just need to offer it to the best of our ability. Which
We'll lay out the different,
seeming a little weird right now.
So it sounds like we need to edit at least. Well, I'm kind of going back to guest parking, but edit that section to be more catered to our specific options, and then how the policy would differ based on those different options. So that section will be a lot longer. And then as far as parking permit application, I guess we're still not entirely decided, but that's my understanding right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree on the guest parking portion in terms of sort of having the menu of all the different options would be nice. For this one, I guess, yeah, I'm still struggling with that. It's a long sentence. I'm struggling to understand. So I guess it's saying that you have proof of residency that you live in this area, even if you don't have proof that the car is registered here, as long as you have, right? Is that?
It almost seems not even worth leaving in at this point. It's just
Well, I mean,
kind of
yeah.
adding a layer of confusion. But yeah, I don't really see. It's not really processing for me either.
We could delete it because it's really a directive.
Yeah. You see, sort of, there's, yeah, I guess the city already has sort of guidelines of what they accept as, yeah.
Plus, you have to change your license of it within 3 days, moving to a new address. That's a different story.
And I guess, sorry, one more thing here. And then for a company car, are we saying you can have it in addition to a residential car or instead of a residential car? Right? Because I guess, could you have an individual have 2 vehicles, then one being a company car, one being a personal vehicle?
Right.
I know above we said before maybe it wasn't allowed, but I'm not, yeah, this is obviously options.
I have an idea. we could delete some of these things and hold them in reserve for when this comes back to us for more clarification, because undoubtedly there will be questions.
I mean, yeah, the great thing is that before our next meeting, we are gonna have our liaison meeting, so that'll be really useful. Because, I mean, we're obviously gonna show them this document, in addition to the edits we're adding right now, but,
Yeah, because the proof of residency, that could be taken out. The company car stuff and leased car stuff is kind of minutia that we could probably leave it out of the report for now. And if it comes back with these questions, then, because I'm sure it will, those questions do need to be answered. But this is just to get this kind of wrapped up in a nice, neat, easy to deal with package for them to begin with and see which way they want to go. And then we can follow up with support on that. How do you guys feel about that?
I know, I like that. I think keeping it as concise with the options that are there so that we can narrow down the options, the council can narrow down the options and go with the option that makes most sense. And then if there's additional details that they want us to work out from that option, we can continue on those details, knowing the one option
Drive
that
ourselves
they
nuts
want.
Going
Right.
through all of this word by word and trying to figure it out right now, but I don't think that's going to accomplish much for us right now because they made us not want that option.
Yeah.
Sounds right, yeah.
I think this came from, Christian had done the research in San Mateo, and he thought it was a good model to kind of structure what a program would look like. But I agree with all the options. It makes it a bit confusing, and it is probably more detailed than is relevant to the discussion we want council to have.
Yeah, and
We don't
he
want
did
them to
great work.
discuss like,
It's really good
hey,
work.
if my car is registered somewhere else, are we gonna allow you to use
Right.
another way of proving that you live here with your car? That's, yeah, way beyond what we're trying to get them to focus on.
Right. There's a lot of work here, and I'm not suggesting in any way that we throw it out because I think we're going to need to come back to it and use it at some point in the future. But our initial presentation does not have to have every detail nailed down, just these are your options, and these are your options. And then these will come back as options again, and with maybe some additions when they give it back to us, when they've made a decision, if they give it back to us.
And I was kind of thinking that, on the police side, Commander Garcia might, they're gonna be the ones seeing what people apply with. So if they want to allow someone to show other proof than their driver's license changed to this address, then I think that their advice is gonna inform this.
Right, and
More
our
than-
police officers are pretty familiar with a lot of the community, face-to-face on a name basis. So that,
Well, but you want it to be documented, right?
well, of course, but, if there was a way to lean one way or the other, and they say, well, that's part of the Montenegro family who's been here for 55 years, and that's so-and-so that just moved
Yeah,
in
that,
with
well,
so-and-so.
right. That works, but then there are always new people they don't know, right? It's,
I mean, it's just a thought, that how they weigh it out is, I know they're familiar with a lot of people on a first name basis, and so, I mean, that really doesn't need to be worked out right now.
I think
So-
staff probably has a directive then in terms of sort of next pieces here. I guess one piece that was missing, or I guess not missing, just I thought was not here that could be, or I really would like to see is I'm not sure which city had it, but one of the cities had it there that if they had a handicap plate, I think they were sort of exempt from that, or that was an option. I would like to maybe see that somewhere here in terms of,
That was also Santa Clara.
Santa Clara. I thought that was kind of very, something that we had not talked about before that I really liked. So that can be also sort of follow up.
exempt from needing a permit at all.
Yeah, I think that would be sort of a case where that would be exempt from a permit situation.
That's a great idea.
I think that's a good idea.
Would you
If-
want that in the presentation or in the notes that we're holding back on?
I mean, I think that's sort of, maybe one of the ones that would be under, again, I think, some of I think we'll see how the details kind of, the menu comes together. I think that would be an option that I think would be nice to at least suggest, but that could also be in the sort of final notes. I don't think that needs to be, that could be a recommendation later on even. But just
Oh,
highlighting that.
Actually, that would fit in perfectly with the suggested parking permit application process.
Or no? Yeah.
Well, and the type of vehicles that are eligible or ineligible, right?
No, I wouldn't go there yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm just because it's a lot of detail, and we have to decide how big a vehicle or how small a vehicle or what type of vehicle. Is it a work vehicle? Is it a personal vehicle? So it's like, I don't think we need to go that far. Just give them the options of the bigger options, and then we can
Narrow down, yeah.
work out the details depending on what they accept.
And then after the chat with liaisons, I think we'll have more guidance as well, and then we can sort of follow up there.
Yeah.
Hypothetical, so if you're using a displayed permit, a hang tag, that's hanging in the same spot. Bumper sticker is a different spot. License plate reader, I guess we'd still want that person that has a handicap placard would qualify for them for a free permit, but we'd still need them to register that.
Right.
I see. If it were license plate reader.
And what about temporary handicap placards?
Well, if it says handicap and it comes up as not permitted, then I guess since it's initially probably going to be visual,
Well, and I guess they'd have a letter from their doctor if it were temporary, and they'd be able to do an appeal.
tape the letter in the window. Again, that's really more specific than I think we need to get right now, but I think, there's got to be a way to do it.
Thinking about the first time, some of these oddball questions came up from the council. What
Well,
about if
a good answer would be
multi-generational?
We
What
do
about-
have that information, but we didn't want to overwhelm you with too much right now, just a basic outline.
Smooth,
That's what I would say.
smooth.
Great, we'll send you to council then.
Oh, no, you won't.
Awesome.
I hate talking in front of council.
In that case, I guess, is there any other comments anyone wants to make on this piece before sort of handing it back, I guess, to staff for next pieces, next steps there?
Yeah, I do. Couple of things. It's not under anything. But at the request of the liaisons, we have targeted streets that will be surveyed for a pro or con vote on the ballot. But we want to call it something else, not a ballot, maybe a survey. I think that should be somehow fit into this. And an attachment would be that the sample ballot that I turned into you. So that they would have that, because that was specifically asked for.
Couple things is that there's going to be an agenda report, and it might fit better there up front, because this is like an appendix to that agenda, an attachment to the agenda report.
Okay.
And in the municipal code, I took some time to read it between the last meeting or maybe the one before. It lays out a potential program, and that's a neighborhood initiated. So if neighbors want a program, they start a petition, and there's language in there. There's specific language that they would have to have on their petition. So,
But it's not a petition, it's a survey by the city.
right. And another clarification, let me walk
That
back
these were
just
our
half a
test
step.
streets initially.
Let me walk back half a step. They kind of talked about that in April, the council, and I'm going to say in the agenda report, council can decide and we have to write code and they have to adopt it. We want to implement a program. They don't have to do that advisory vote or whatever it is. But we think they're going to elect to.
Well, they did say that they specifically wanted something sent to the residents on these
Right, but they didn't make a motion and I'll vote on anything. So, again, the they is,
They meaning the liaisons.
yeah.
And they provided the streets that they wanted to do this survey on. So I think there should be some mention of that, and that's it for that. The only other thing I have is, the spreadsheet. I had a couple of things on the spreadsheet.
The financial spreadsheet, Linda, or the one about the three cities?
The three cities,
Right.
I didn't print the financial.
I'm not sure we got that. I wasn't sure if you were thinking about it from before for the screen. I don't think we got that
Oh,
financial
no, I
one
didn't, there's
previously.
nothing on my screen, that has anything, any information, but I didn't get a financial spreadsheet. There was something on here. Okay, just for our own information, I'm noting that, although these are all, except for San Mateo, license plate reader programs. And I think that we were in April, taking away from the April meeting, that the council is leaning towards a sticker solution or a parking permit solution. And okay, a lot of my notes don't make any sense anymore because we've already talked about them, so I'm just going to stop. Thank you very much for putting up with all this. Appreciate it.
Great. Alrighty. Well, with that then, I guess we'll.
Can I read from the Muni Code what it says about if neighbors wanted to initiate a permit? The application shall include the following statement. We, the undersigned, are residents of the proposed designated permit area described in this petition. We understand that, 1, if this area is designated, certain restrictions will be placed upon on-street parking within the area. 2, residents of the area will be entitled to obtain a limited number of permits exempting their vehicles from such parking restrictions. But if a resident owns a vehicle without having a permit displayed, that vehicle will be subject to the parking restrictions. 3, parking permits will be issued for a term of 1 year and will need to be renewed each year. 4, the cost of installing and maintaining the parking restriction signs, well, this is what the code says now, and cost of issuing the annual parking permits will be paid by the residents. The city of Brisbane will have no obligation to collect delinquent payments from any resident. That part's weird. So, I mean, that could be what the ballot says. So that it's
Direction from the liaison, it was only supposed to ask one thing. Would you be in favor of a parking permit? So once we get that response, if it's positive or leans towards the positive, like we want to go ahead, that could be sent out to confirm the cooperation.
I mean, well, let's let them rule next. It seems like sending out 2 things is maybe overkill. People,
Well, we've got to get their agreement first, or at least feel them out, and I think that's what the ballot thing was about, was just to find out if people on those selected streets are even interested in seeing how it goes. They may not. Nobody may respond positively.
actually, that should be another column on the options spreadsheet, is cost for a formal ballot, cost for an informal ballot.
Do we have a cost spreadsheet that was sent to us?
I don't think it was shared. I think it was on the screen only earlier. That what was we looking at? I had not received
Oh,
it
I
either.
just missed the whole thing. Okay, sorry.
Great. Alrighty. I guess that'll conclude tonight's discussion on this portion of the old business then. We'll move on to new business, of which there is none. Staff updates?
Crocker Trail resurfacing ribbon cutting is 2 weeks from today at 11 a.m. Project is almost done. Just to clarify, a lot of people have asked about the things that were studied in the master plan. I don't remember, one of you was on that committee with the Crocker Trail master plan, right? So just, this is, if anybody else is watching, we got this grant to resurface the trail, and the low bid was a little bit under the money for the grant. We used it putting extra material down, and we were able to use it to freshen up some of the signs, but then that was kind of all the money. And put a weed barrier down that wasn't in the original plan, but that was all the money that was in the grant. The master plan identified possible paths to funding and all the things that the community was interested in having, furnishings, I guess you call it, benches and art and gathering spaces and wayfinding signs and all of that. That's all looking for other sources of funding at this time, because even I'm hearing that feedback even from council members. Well, we want to do the next stuff. Yeah, you've got to pay, or someone's got to help us with that. But we're hearing positive feedback about the resurfacing, that trail's much better, so you guys are all welcome to come to that. I know it's during the daytime, so I don't know if that's good for anyone else. What else? We put out, council hopefully will award tomorrow night contracts to repair Visitation Avenue to resurface. So that's going to be a little bit chaotic because, construction happening on a really busy street. So we're going to do a lot of outreach about that. Hopefully we'll be able to do it this fall before it starts raining. What else is on the horizon? We are still actively working on, we have a consultant working on design for the Alvarado to San Benito stairway, and we're hoping that we can build that next summer. And we did get, you guys know, we got grant funding to finish the design and construction on Tulare to Santa Clara, that stairway mid-block, and then work on design, but only design for Santa Clara to Alvarado, continuing down, and for the path that runs from the upper, not the top of San Francisco, over to Old County Bayshore, that people use to get to the bus and get over there. Other,
The local road safety plan, if you guys recall, I think we were a little late on it, but we sent you guys a link to provide any feedback, and the whole community had opportunity to provide feedback. But on the consultants end, they sent us a list of recommendations that Brisbane would be supportive of, and similarly policies that would be supportive of, and they gave us a long list. They did this to all the agencies involved in the local road safety plan. But basically, they're just asking, do you support this? Do you support A? Do you support B? Do you support C? No, yes. And from there, they're going to thin down that list. So that's moving along, and we just sent them our determination of what we support today.
and that was for the high injury network, which in Brisbane was Guadalupe Canyon Parkway, Bayshore Boulevard, and Sierra Point Parkway, the frontage along 101. So not the big pedestrian corridors, but
There were several comments about sidewalks or lack thereof on Bayshore. Is that something that did that come back from them?
They definitely, we'll definitely hear about it in the coming, they have that information. And yeah, Bayshore is like probably the main point of our local road safety plan. So I'm sure it will.
Okay.
That's all.
Any committee member matters?
Yes.
Definitely. Great. Sorry, close my agenda. I think that's it then, right? That's
yeah,
it?
so next month we hope to bring back a little more refined product that we'll all review again before we get to council with it. And hopefully
But the meeting
wrap
with
up.
liaisons is between now and then, correct?
We're scheduling it, and I'm hoping that, yeah.
Okay,
The goal is to have it in a couple weeks, so, yeah.
It feels like a good night's work, and look at the time.
Well, with that, do we get a call or motion to adjourn then?
I think you can just
Oh.
adjourn.
Meeting adjourned then. At 7:52 p.m. Great.